Hey everybody, this is Eli from Elfbait, and welcome back to day 14 of the Dungeons & Dragons 30-day challenge. Now, day 14, if I seem a little nonplussed on this one, day 14 is a video I've recorded twice already, but for whatever reason my recording software wasn't keeping it, so I'm having to go through this topic for a third time, and it was really a hard one to get through in the first place, and that is favorite NPC. Now, for a lot of DMs, they may have pet NPCs. I really am not one of those DMs. I have characters that come and go, and while some may make return trips, I don't really get attached to them. I develop them for sure, and they certainly do fill a function in the game, but I can't say that I really have a favorite that stands out amongst them all. So I'm going to sort of sidestep the question, and I'm going to talk about favorites. NPCs that have stood out that I enjoyed, that I've used maybe more than once, used repeatedly. But I don't have a favorite. It's just not something my brain has gravitated to over the years. So first of all is a more recent character that has shown up in my games, and that's for my current campaign in Aerolith. I have a character, an NPC, named Val Morgan. Now, Val Morgan I like because Val Morgan is an NPC that I feel will be with the campaign for a while. To explain that, let me kind of talk about who he is. Val Morgan shows up at the very beginning of this campaign that I'm running, in this brand new campaign world that I've created, and he is an exile. He's what's called the vassal man, and that is a sort of a census taker, tax collector kind of a thing for the vassalry of Aerolith. A little bit of background: vassalry of Aerolith is a new political body that sits in the shadows, sort of almost a post-apocalyptic setting without super wasteland, but we had a great kingdom, the High Kingdom of Aerolith, which was ruled by a tyrannical overlord, which was destroyed with the coming of a legendary sort of epic figure called the Red King. After the Red King's defeat, most of what passed for Aerolith's original nobility and the bloodlines that fueled that nobility, and to a good degree the gentry, are gone. And so Aerolith has evolved in the shadow of the Red King, or not the shadow of the Red King, but the aftermath of the Red King, into sort of this weird collective, cooperative bunch of city-states, all under a figure known as the High Vassal. And this is a gentleman, an individual in the world who has titled himself as the High Vassal because he is the highest servant of the land. So we have this sort of all the different major population centers that existed under the High King are now sort of all answering to this collective agency, and part of that agency are the vassal men, and these are sort of the agents of the vassalry who go around and make sure that these independent city-states are doing their job, that they're reporting their resources to the vassalry. But that's not what makes Val Morgan interesting. Val Morgan is interesting because he shows up initially as kind of this panicked, doddering clerk. He's disheveled when they first meet him. He's been dragged through the muck. He's freaking out about his book, with this grand tome, his ledger, and the original adventure that kicked off the campaign was the party having to recover this ledger from the Red Hand. Now, the Red Hand is a bandit brotherhood that kind of consider themselves the inheritors of the Red King's legacy. Whether that's bullshit or not, or if it's just a matter of terror on their part, remains to be seen. But they themselves hold to the identity of being the inheritors of the legacy of the Red King. They mark their hands with either red paint, or they wear red gauntlets, or other markings. So they're very brazen. Anyways, so Val Morgan is freaked out. The party goes through their adventure. They recover his ledger. They recover his clerk and his pages that were captured, that were kidnapped, along with his book. And it is discovered that the clerk may have been in cahoots with the Red Hand as far as the abduction and the theft. And so this is where Val Morgan's character takes an interesting turn as the party parts with him at night, leaving him to his servants in their quarters at the local inn. He gives them a token, a medallion that they can redeem at the bank of Aerolith, the central bank of Aerolith, in Vassal City. And they, as they're turning away, contemplating what this means, what kind of treasure is it, what kind of reward are they going to get, they hear the door close, and then they hear a blade sinking into flesh. So at that point, they don't know, is it Val Morgan that's dead? Who got stabbed, basically. So down the road, they get to Vassal City, where they are then led to a meeting with Val Morgan, who is living rather large for a functionary. I got some tea going on here because I'm fighting a bit of a cold. But he's in a nice house. He's got all these trophies and treasures that are on his walls and in cases. Some of them very valuable, some of them looking very old. And the man that they meet is not the shaken clerk that they had originally met, and he is not the gracious recipient of their goodwill that they met towards the end. But he doesn't provide any answers as to what happened to his clerk. That is kind of glanced over. And in speaking with him, they learn that this is a man in the know. He's definitely got connections. He's aware of what's going on throughout the vassalry. He's aware, he's hyper aware of what's going on within Vassal City, the former capital of the High Kingdom of Aerolith, now the capital of the vassalry of Aerolith. It's been renamed from Highhold, to Vassal City. He is very much connected and very much aware, and so they start to get a feel for this. Now, later on, they kind of run afoul of the city government, the city guard, when they answer a call for aid from some local magic students. Vassal City has Aerolith's only college of magic, sort of a, I don't want to call it a Hogwarts, but for functional sake, it's basically their Hogwarts. It's a collegiate institution of magic. They're approached by some magic students, and they help them. This leads them to an old tower which belongs to the High Warlock, formerly of the former ruling class of Aerolith. After going in through that and going on a bit of an adventure, they show up. They come out, suddenly find themselves targeted by the guards of the city. They kind of run through the city looking for a way to lay low. And they're confronted by a captain of the city guard, who then reveals himself to be on their side, an agent of Val Morgan, leads them to a place where they can lay low. So Val Morgan has now shown that he's got connections in the government within the guard. So this character just keeps evolving. And I'm going to assume that as the game continues, he will continue to make appearances and serve a function in the campaign. But they really haven't figured out who he is and what he's like. And he's fun to play, and he's got potential. He's got legs, and so he's an NPC that stands out. Now, another NPC that stands out is one that they also met in the kickoff of the Aerolith campaign, but he's actually an NPC that I've used before in other campaigns, and by that he's also appeared in other worlds. Now, his name is Coldebarl, and Coldebarl is sort of this rough, roguish mercenary. He's got a thick brogue to his speech, and he usually speaks of himself in the third person. Coldebarl does not do this. Coldebarl does not believe in this. Now, when they meet him in the Aerolith campaign, he is a grizzled veteran. He's sitting deep in his cups in the corner of the inn when Val Morgan shows up, and he's just kind of gruff. In fact, at one point he can't keep up. He falls back. He originally volunteers to aid them and go on the adventure, but he ends up falling back and can't keep up. Now, in other campaigns that I've used him in, he's appeared alternate at different ages and different points in his career. He's always kind of garishly dressed, not like in like fancy flouncy clothes, but his armor is kind of intricately made. He's got an eye patch. He wears his hair high and kind of poofed out of the top of a headband. He fights with a battle axe. He fights with a kind of a lighter battle axe, a one-handed battle axe, not a great axe, and it's just not a sword, not a dagger. He's just kind of this swashbuckling character, and I've enjoyed using him with different groups, and he's provided some interesting character and comic relief. I think of all the other NPCs that I can remember, because there's been a lot of them, one that was particularly fun is the character that became known as the Pocket Goblin. So in a campaign I ran in 3.5, as the party was going through Ravania, which is sort of this Slavic, Eastern European sort of a nation in my campaign world, which is heavy in Fey folk. I mean, saturated in day-to-day life with the Fey, and then also dealing with supernatural, demonic and undead threats and stuff. Just take, everything dark and moody that you could think of. Throw in some, Brian Froud styled, Jim Henson-y goblins, and you have Ravania. The Pocket Goblin is a goblin, and in this case, these goblins are the Fey goblins that I ran in my campaign and often appear in almost all campaigns. They're goblins spelled with a Y instead of an I, to delineate them from non-Fey goblins. And the Fey goblins are your kind of multi-shaped, little pesky, just kind of twitchy freaks. And so the Pocket Goblin is a goblin that was befriended by Desmore, the ogre ranger that was in that campaign, and the reason he's known as the Pocket Goblin is that he built himself a home in one of Desmore's pockets, in Desmore's overcoat, to the point where it seemed like he had sort of this little pocket realm, this little Fey pocket realm down there. He had set up a workshop in there. The goblins with a Y are kind of ingenious and industrious, making all sorts of weird and wacky inventions similar to what you'd think of like Tinker Gnomes from Kryn. And on occasion, this Pocket Goblin would emerge from Desmore's pocket in a most Sesame Street Oscar fashion and pull out some useful bit. Now, it was never at the control of the players, and I just used it as a fun gag to run in the group. I didn't use it heavily because I didn't want it to grow tiresome, but there were occasions where the party would ask if the goblin could help, and he may or may not help. Sometimes he wouldn't respond. Sometimes they would hear a snoring from the pocket. It was just a fun shtick, but that was interesting and amusing. But yeah, so I mean, those are 3 NPCs that I've run that are particularly favorites of mine, but I don't have a single favorite. The 30-day challenge has some great questions. It has some that are kind of stinkers, like, favorite dice. I'm trying not to sub out too many of them, though I may have to think about subbing them, because this one really I had to reach for as well. But yeah, I mean, NPCs are great. You put them into your campaign, they serve a purpose, you have some fun with them, and then often they're forgotten until the party comes back that way again. One other honorable mention would be Elwyn, the Master of Charts, also from the Aerolith campaign. He was a little clerk in Coulter's Cove, which is a whaling town, almost a whaling city on the west coast of Aerolith. When the party met him, he was the contact that they needed to get for some information to a location they had to go to in their first adventure when they were trying to get to White Crag Fortress, the ruins of White Crag Fortress. And so they had asked around. They found out some information. He likes tea. He was really responsive to a company because he's actually just a functionary of the city of Coulter's Cove. He was tucked into a back office alongside the rest of the pages and file clerks and stuff. When they find him, his office, the sign actually reads chart keeper or chart clerk, and he has crossed out keeper, clerk, and put master. He's very much trying to elevate himself. When they meet him, he's very effete. He's kind of very weedy and overplays his position, but ultimately helps the party because they ingratiate themselves to him with ample tea and attention. He was fun to play. I'm hoping they go back to Coulter's Cove because there were some interesting personalities there. The mayor was fun. There's a particular banquet hall that is there called the Fisherman's Fluke. That was an interesting character. The mayor was kind of shady, but he was still fun. But it was a fun town. Anyways, this is not about towns. This is about NPCs. So that is favorite NPCs. That's day 14 of the 30-day Dungeons and Dragons challenge. Really thank you guys for tuning in and checking these out. Please keep the comments coming. Share with me your stories about your favorite NPCs. Like, share, subscribe. I'm always looking for ideas for new videos, questions in regard to games that you may have run, or rules that you have issues with, or how to do things as a player or a DM. Please hit me up. I'm happy to ask, and I'll either answer in the comments where you put the question, or if you email me, or another place to do that is on the Elfbait Facebook page. There's a Facebook group, I should say, over there. On if you just check out Elfbait, it's hard not to find it because, well, Elfbait's pretty distinct. And while I post the episodes, as they come out there, I also will answer any questions you put there. But anyways, certainly appreciate the viewership and checking me out. Thanks for coming by, and get out and game.